What's poppin'? Do you have those movies that you constantly revisit every now and then? Those movies you just cannot get sick of? The ones where you have the lines memorized all in your head? Well, the one movie that I think crosses a lot of people's minds is Shrek. Coming out more than 20 years ago, this movie was essentially one of the biggest game changers in animation and culture. It cemented DreamWorks' place as a juggernaut in animation and has gone down as one of the most beloved, respected, and relatable films of all time. Shrek has even gone down into the National Film Registry, which is a commendable honor. But why is this film still talked about, quoted, and celebrated to this day? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So without further ado, this is Shrek 22 years later. I think like any sort of description of Shrek, you always kind of have to include the fact that he is basically anti-Disney. The antipathy of everything Disney is. No musical numbers, no prim and proper princesses, and best of all, no Prince Charming hero. Instead, it's a green mean ogre, and Prince Charming is a villain. So before Shrek and all the other icons were born, one of the founders of DreamWorks used to work for Disney actually. In 1994, allegedly, after not receiving a promotion that he believed he deserved, he left Disney with bitterness and resentment. This, of course, is the man himself, Jeffrey Katzenberg. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Jeffrey Katzenberg, Steven Spielberg, and David Geffen, I believe is how you pronounce it, would go on to found DreamWorks, which was originally made to make live-action films. SKG can even be found in some of the title sequences for the movies, of course standing for each of their initials. Eventually, DreamWorks would dabble their hand in animation. Little did they know, however, as they got to work on an animated movie, they would undoubtedly create one of the biggest animated controversies ever. That's right, because 2 months before Disney's A Bug's Life came out, DreamWorks released Ants. What the hell? This is so strange considering the premise of both of these movies are so goddamn similar. Whether or not one company stole an idea from another, or it's just pure coincidence, is still up for debate to this day. There really isn't a whole lot of evidence to back anything up, so it's really difficult to say what's true. I personally think it was just a coincidence, much like how in 2022 there were 3 different Pinocchio films released. Ultimately though, A Bug's Life performed better than Ants, but one thing was for certain: the war had begun.
And our glorious rivalry was born.
They would go on to release 2 2D animated films and 1 stop motion, but didn't really have that much of a breakthrough, especially coming off of the release of Toy Story 2, and despite the strange year that was 2000 for Disney, it still managed to be above Disney in the eyes of the people. Little did they know, however, the biggest bomb was about to be dropped. DreamWorks was about to drop the nuke of animated films, and to put it lightly, Disney was not ready for this. And even though the voice for Shrek had to be replaced due to the previous voice actor passing away, and the style was changed completely, and Mike Myers re-recorded every line for Shrek to give him a more Scottish accent, Shrek would debut on April 22nd, 2001, and on a budget of $60 million. It would hit number 1 at the box office and garner $500 million, a Best Animated Feature award, and an award for Best Adapted Screenplay. This film was a hit in every sense of the word, and with that, Disney now had a run for its money. DreamWorks had now fully cemented itself as an animation juggernaut, and essentially created a new format to how every DreamWorks movie would be after Shrek. For better or for worse, you can decide for yourself. But Shrek had taken the world by surprise. But let's actually talk about this film. Let's get a little deeper and see why this film has managed to cement itself. For starters, the most obvious thing about Shrek that I think everyone associates this movie with is its spin on fairy tales. That's one of the most notable things about it, and it uses this aspect to its comedy, which, oh boy, in case you've been under a rock for 22 years, this movie is really funny. Duh. The humor is extremely edgy and sharp, and just like the formation of DreamWorks itself, Shrek is just one giant middle finger to Disney, poking fun at some of their classic characters that Disney made iconic. This movie is definitely really clever and witty with its humor, and the fact that the main protagonist is an ogre? Yeah, this is definitely not a Disney movie. Hell, even the main villain is a joke in and of himself, an iconic one to be sure, but definitely played off as a joke. Honestly, as a comedy, this movie excels with its humor, and the voice cast is honestly just perfect. Could not imagine anyone else playing the voice of Shrek or the others. But underneath all of that comedy, all that laughing, all that charm, there's a greater, deeper story to be told. The adventure Shrek endures is one of action and self-discovery. Shrek himself has always been depicted by society as a monster. Someone who can never be loved. Someone not worth giving a chance on. And this is basically what everyone thinks. The villagers, Farquaad and his kingdom. Everyone except for two certain people would beg to differ. One of them being Fiona. Despite her being a princess and initially thinking she wants a life with a handsome prince as a prim and proper princess in a royal family, her wants change to finding someone who loves her instead. And loves her for her. An ogre. Wow, shocker, who saw that coming? That she was an ogre? Who would have thought? It's not like this movie's been out for 22 years now. Jeez. Still a good twist though, and in the movie, it explains a lot of her improper behavior. And ultimately, she and Shrek's relationship is boosted for their likeness. And Shrek and Fiona's arcs of finding love with someone else play off each other really well, as they both want to be accepted by someone. Fiona believes that she has to mask herself in order to be truly loved. However, it is Shrek that reminds her that she already is beautiful, even as an ogre. They have the same goals, and for a love story, it's really sweet. Fiona is a pivotal role in Shrek's life, and he can finally find someone who doesn't see him as a monster. Fiona is the love that Shrek always needed in his life, his true love. He sees Fiona for what she is, and she sees him for what he is. This is a good enough relationship as it is, but there's another one we need to talk about. There's an equally important relationship in this movie that I think often gets overlooked. Donkey's friendship with Shrek is equally as important and integral to Shrek as Fiona is. Donkey was Shrek's first friend that did not judge him based on his first looks and impressions. Well, he was his first friend, period. Despite Donkey's pestering and always moving mouth, Shrek comes to respect him and be grateful to have a friend who accepts Shrek for who he really is. Donkey's loyalty is shown throughout the movie, even if it almost gets him killed, or even...
Magnitude. Hey, that is unwanted physical contact. Hey.
Like, do y'all ever think about how Donkey literally did it with a dragon and had dragon donkey babies? Freaking dronkies? I still find that crazy to be honest, but back to what I was saying. There is this great scene where Shrek and Donkey are both outside admiring the constellations, and they have a genuinely good moment. It's through Donkey's constant pressuring that he finally gets Shrek to say something more personal, saying how people judge him before they even get to know him.
Problem, Shrek. What you got against the whole world anyway? Huh?
Look, I'm not the one with the problem, okay? It's the world that seems to have a problem with me. They judge me before they even know me.
This is a line that cuts extremely deep. I think in a way, a lot of us have felt this feeling before. Being judged before someone even fully knows us. And that hurts. Donkey later reassures Shrek that he never believed that he was an ugly, gross, angry ogre. He saw him as a friend. Then they continue to look at the constellations together and have a moment. Combined with the soft and beautiful score in the background, this is genuinely one of the most heartwarming scenes in Shrek, and it tells us a lot about how he feels on the inside. Fiona may have been the first person Shrek fell in love with, but Donkey was the first person who accepted Shrek for him, and their dynamic, I think this goes without saying, is so fun and iconic. But it's a friendship that ultimately goes much deeper. Of course, there's also the scene where Shrek and Donkey are on their way to Fiona, and they have the conversation about how ogres have layers, which has not only gone down as one of the best quotes in cinema, but also ties really well with the message of Shrek. There's something so genuine and simple about the line that has managed to cement itself in our culture so well. Everybody can make do with a friend like Donkey, who's always just being supportive, loyal, and understanding of how you really feel. These three make for a lovable and iconic group of protagonists. But hey, the heroes are only as good as their villains. Lord Farquaad has gone down as one of the most iconic villains in animated films. His villainous outfit that presents himself as such a regal and powerful threat with his red gloves, large head, and flowy cape is just perfect. His gruff and irritated face combined with his stubble makes him honestly freaky to look at. Shrek has always gone for this more realistically textured environment and characters, so this fits right in line with everything else. With this first opening, we are made to believe that he's this big baddie with a tall stature, from this perspective at least. But of course, as the camera takes another look, he's short king to be exact. I mean literally, well, soon to be king if he wasn't eaten by a dragon. The whole interrogation scene on Gingy is just so awesome. I love how serious it's taken despite the fairy tale jokes. Even though he literally waterboards Gingy with milk and straight up rips off his legs is still comedic. The whole magic mirror scene is just so much fun too. I will say, compared to some of the other villains in the Shrek universe, he's definitely on the lower list in terms of overall threat. The other ones are just so much more interesting, but it's okay. Lord of Farquaad isn't necessarily an active threat throughout the movie, but it's fine because more so than anything, he's just a joke. I think I heard somewhere he's actually based on an actual Disney employee or executive, which isn't surprising considering this movie's track record with attacking Disney. But he doesn't necessarily have to be an active antagonist towards Shrek anyways, since this adventure is a bit more personal for Shrek. He's more like a jerk for you to hate. A funny jerk, but a jerk nonetheless. And he's honestly just not taken super seriously by any of the characters. His own citizens cheered on Shrek as Shrek was beating up the royal knights. Gingy, of course, spat in his face, and Shrek and Donkey cracked jokes about Lord Farquaad being small, even if Fiona squishes down his cake statue. Even the magic mirror is freaked out by him, for obvious reasons. Despite all of this, he's still a funny villain to be laughed at, and has some great scenes until he's ultimately eaten by a dragon. Pretty cool and fun villain for the first Shrek, and probably the one that's most thinked about when thinking of Shrek, so he gets some brownie points there. One of the other things that make this movie as memorable and as cunning as it is the soundtrack. The usage of songs here perfectly encapsulates the tone of this movie so well. The minute All Star plays when Shrek comes out of the toilet after taking the fattest dookie of his life, basically sets up the movie saying, yeah, this ain't Disney, but you sure as hell ain't watching the wrong movie. This is Shrek through and through, trust. Bad Reputation is a really well done action song that tells us how Shrek feels during this moment. He couldn't care less about assaulting royal knights, or straight up wasting giant barrels of beer. He is Shrek, man. He gotta do what he gotta do. I'm on My Way by the Proclaimers is a nice touch, and Hallelujah hits really hard with the scenes presented. There are some genuinely good transitions here, and some beautiful imagery. Okay, honestly, Shrek has always been pretty good about using imagery. The shot where we see Fiona alone at the table, and Shrek alone, is something that really hits hard. A great example of show don't tell. And of course, I'm a Believer at the end of the movie is just great. It really fits the vibe of the movie, and up until recording this, I had gone my whole life believing it was made for this movie. But it actually wasn't, which is a little hard to believe since the song has lyrics that would beg to differ. It's even later used in Shrek Forever After at the end, and oh hey, it's covered by...
Hope you guys like Weezer.
I think I'm a Believer fits better here though, but still a nice touch. Shrek's soundtrack screams the 2000s, but that's not a bad thing. The soundtrack fits really great for this movie, and that's perfect. And I haven't even begun to talk about the score. It is really good, to this day. Shrek's Fairytale theme even became the main theme for DreamWorks as a whole at this point. The song that plays when they are being chased by the dragon is still really good, and a great chase song. So the music for Shrek still holds up, and are still bangers. So what else is there to talk about for this movie? I think we've covered everything, right? Well, there is the personal connection I have with this movie. Shrek ultimately is such a good movie because it hits closer to us. There have been times where I think a lot of us have felt like outcasts. Times where we weren't accepted for who we really are and judged. Made fun of because of our background, interests, or even our looks. I think in some sort of way we can all relate to Shrek. But just like Shrek, there are people who love us for us. People who share the same quirks. People who genuinely enjoy spending time with you. And people who like you for you. Society will tend to portray you as one thing, and one thing only, never understanding the full complexity of you as an individual. But just like Shrek, we all have layers. And it's those people who recognize that complexity that are the ones worth living for. Despite the people who might dislike you, or those who don't understand you or accept you, there will always be someone to be there for you. Shrek in a way is more like us than we think. This movie to me personally has always been a joy to revisit. And it is probably going to stay that way till I die. Its deep, mature themes, its killer soundtrack, and lovable characters just make this film so amazing. I will never forget the fond memories I have of watching it with my parents, with my brother, with my sister, with everyone in my family really, with all my friends, everyone. It may just be nostalgia corrupting my whole view on this movie, but honestly, it makes me happy. It's a happy memory that I have. There is a reason it has stood the test of time, and even gone to the National Film Registry like I said. Hell, there's a reason even Shrekfest is around, right? Not sure if I'll ever talk about the other films, but I guess we'll see. The sheer passion and love for these characters in movies is so prevalent on the internet, whether it be the memes, retellings, YTPs, or video essays like mine. My love for Shrek will continue on to live happily ever after. And all I can say is, thank you. Thank you for making my childhood and teaching me to appreciate myself for who I am.